I'm really happy to be here. I love sport. I tend to be more of like an individual sport person. I do things like rock climbing and boxing and stuff. I did lacrosse when I was in high school. I played lacrosse for one season. We had a perfect 0 season. We had one game where we were ahead at halftime by 3 points, and we were all just like, this is it, we're finally going to win a game, and then we lost by like 17-3. So I'm really thrilled to be here, but I want to start by saying that I am a Kiwi. I flew up this morning from Christchurch, where I live. I've been in New Zealand for over 13 years now. This is my home. I became a citizen in 2013. And I think it's important to highlight that right at the beginning, because I know you can tell from my accent that I'm not from here originally, and the alternative is a little embarrassing just at present. I know that as soon as I say I'm from America, what everybody's thinking, which is what the heck is going on over there? And I bring this up not to make a political statement. There might be people in this room who are Trump supporters. It's none of my business, although we should talk. But more because it's just so surprising that he's the president. It's been over a year, and it's still every day like, really? He's the president? And that's not mean. Like, he was surprised when he won, right? Everybody was surprised by this. Every poll, every pundit, every editorial, like everybody had this going the other way. Nate Silver, the guru statistician who rose to fame in the 2012 election for correctly anticipating every one of the 50 states, the morning of the 2016 election, this is how he had it pegged. 71% Clinton, 28% Trump. Everybody got this wrong, except for this fish, which correctly ate off of a picture of Donald Trump instead of one of Hillary Clinton, and this artificially intelligent predictive system, which correctly anticipated the results of the election weeks out. So this is the kind of thing that's interesting to me. How is it possible that the humans are getting it so wrong and the computers are getting it so right? So as our MC said, I am the New Zealand ambassador for an organization called Singularity University. Singularity University, based in Silicon Valley, housed at the NASA Ames Research Center. This is this crazy hangar that's on campus at NASA Ames. It was built to house fully inflated blimps. It's so massive. To give you a sense of scale, if you can see, there's a tiny yellow dot in the bottom left corner. That's a road sign. This thing is absolutely ginormous. NASA Ames is a very crazy place, and Singularity University was founded by these two guys. And these guys are really kind of titans of the tech world. The guy on the right is Peter Diamandis. Peter started X Prize Foundation, which does large cash prizes for extremely ambitious but extremely well-bounded engineering challenges. So the first one that they did was a $10 million prize for the first private group that could get a manned vehicle to space and back, land it safely, and then repeat that feat within 2 weeks. And that prize is what led to Virgin Galactic. It's what led to SpaceX. Like, pretty much the entire private space industry was kickstarted by this large cash prize. And they've gone on to replicate that model in all sorts of industries and all sorts of endeavors. They've used it for healthcare, for education, for drought. They found that as a model for spurring investment into R&D and innovation, it's tremendously effective. They put up a large cash prize. They put up a challenge that is ambitious enough to stir men's souls. And the teams who are competing for the prize will collectively invest anywhere from 10 to 100 times the value of that prize. Think about that for a second. $10 million prize, $100 million to $1 billion worth of investment in trying to address the challenge. Not only that, but you get hundreds of perspectives on the issue rather than just one. Peter's done all sorts of other things as well. He started International Space University. He started a company called Planetary Resources, which is mining asteroids. He started a company called Human Longevity, Inc. with J. Craig Venter, who decoded the human genome. He's a tremendously accomplished guy, but the guy on the left is even more relevant to this morning's conversation. His name is Ray Kurzweil, and he invented everything. Seriously, he invented flatbed scanners, he invented optical character recognition, he invented text-to-speech for blind people, he invented the Kurzweil synthesizer. He's got 21 honorary doctorates. He's received honors from 3 US presidents. He's written 7 books, 5 of them bestsellers. He's a director of engineering at Google, like total underachiever. But one of the most interesting things about Ray is we've gone back and looked at the predictions he's made about where technology is going since these early 90s. And they found that he has an astonishing 86% accuracy rate. 86%. It's a tremendous achievement. If you think about some of the dramatic technological changes we've seen over the past 20, 30 years, 86% is really quite extraordinary. To the degree that he predicted that by 1998, a computer would beat a human at chess. And of course, in 1997, IBM's Deep Blue beat Garry Kasparov. To that level of specificity. So when Ray Kurzweil says something about where technology is going, generally worth paying attention to him. So I first got involved with these guys about 3.5 years ago. I did their executive program. It's a 6-day program at their headquarters at NASA Ames. And I'll tell you what, one of the other hats that I wear is that I run our local TEDx event. I don't know if you guys are familiar with TED Talks. So I run TEDx in Christchurch. We've been going. Next year will be our 10-year anniversary. And my job as the curator of a TEDx event is to pay attention to new innovations. It's to be across like what's up and coming, what's coming down the pike. And so when I went to Singularity, I thought, okay, this is going to be fun. I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be interesting. I'm excited. I didn't think it would completely upend my entire understanding of the world, my entire understanding of the nature of technological progression and of the scale and depth of its impact on every single one of us, not just on tech people. This stuff is set to transform our economy, our government, our healthcare system, our education system. Everything about the way we live, work, and play is touched by this stuff. And I came away with a sense of urgency and responsibility to help more people understand what I had learned so that collectively we could start to be better informed about the kind of future we're creating. So my job over the next half an hour or so is to boil down everything I learned in those 6 days into 3 core insights. And the first one starts with this guy. So this is Gordon Moore. One of the co-founders of Intel Corporation. And in 1965, he made the observation that the number of transistors we could fit on an integrated circuit had been doubling every 18 months as far back as we could see. And he made a prediction that that number would continue to double as far forward as we can see. This became known as Moore's Law. You might have heard of it. So the first insight comes from Ray Kurzweil, he of the 86% accuracy rate. And what Kurzweil said was, hang on a minute. What if it's not actually about the transistors at all? So fun fact you may not know about Moore's Law, Gordon Moore made his famous prediction based on a data set of 4. He had 4 data points. But Kurzweil said, what if we zoom out on Moore's Law? And instead of looking at the number of transistors we can fit on an integrated circuit, we look instead at what we might call the price performance of computing. How many million instructions per second can you buy for $1,000? Turns out that number has been doubling for almost 120 years. Starting way back at the beginning of computing with electromechanical punch cards, moving on to relays, and then vacuum tubes, and then transistors, and only then integrated circuits. Moore's Law is actually the 5th iteration of this underlying doubling paradigm, not the first. Kurzweil called it the law of accelerating returns. Here's a way to think about it. Today, for $1,000, you can buy roughly the number of instructions per second that a mouse brain can process. But according to Kurzweil, by about 2023, just 5 years from now, for $1,000, you'll be able to buy the number of instructions per second that a human brain can process. And by 2049, for $1,000, you'll be able to buy the number of instructions per second of all human brains on the planet combined. This doubling curve explains why you today, via the smartphone in your pocket, have access to more information than Bill Clinton had the entire time that he was president of the United States. I reckon that's why he looks kind of pissed off in his pictures. Wish I had an iPhone. Although I'm sure he's super glad Instagram was not a thing when he was around. Whew. Right, insight number 1, not just about the transistors, it's about the price performance of computing. Insight number 2 is that it's not just about computing. This doubling phenomenon applies to any technology once it becomes what we call information-enabled. Think about something like photography. Photography used to be substrate-enabled. It was dependent on the physical film for you to do the thing. And then it became information-enabled, dependent instead on ones and zeros. And once that happened, it started to follow a doubling in price performance, much like computing. The first digital camera had a resolution of 0.01 megapixel. Today, you can get a 41 megapixel camera as part of a smartphone. right? So some of the technologies that have become powered by information, powered by ones and zeros, and are now starting to follow doubling curves, computing obviously the base one, but also artificial intelligence, robotics, biotechnology, nanotechnology, gene sequencing, neuroscience, energy, all becoming powered by information, powered by ones and zeros, and all starting to follow similar doubling curves in terms of price performance. So what does that mean? Why should we care? What's so important about a doubling curve? Well, it turns out they have a few characteristics that actually make them kind of imperative to pay attention to. And the first one is that they look flat for a really long time. And you'll know this if you've ever tried to do that trick where you fold a piece of paper in half 8 times. Anybody ever try that trick? First fold is easy, second fold is easy, third fold is easy, 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 easy. Like, this trick is so dumb, why am I even bothering? It's so easy. And it's not until you hit that 6th, 7th, 8th fold of the paper that things start to get a little crazy. The second characteristic is that our brains are totally not wired for this stuff. We evolved on the savannah chasing prey and running from predators that behaved in a predictable, linear fashion. We evolved to understand that a lion could run from that end of the room to that end of the room. Not to understand that a lion could run from that end of the room to the moon. And so as a result, the experts continue to predict linear, no matter how much evidence we have to the contrary. Gordon Moore himself, twice, said that Moore's law was over. Both times proven wrong. Like, the guy who invented the law, he can't get his own law right. So I don't know what hope the rest of us have. But the difference between something following a linear trajectory and something following a doubling curve, it's insane. 30 linear steps and we're back out at morning tea. 30 doubling steps and we're 26 times around the planet. And the tricky thing there is that we're not halfway until the 29th step. So it's really hard to measure progress as you go. I don't think there's a single person in this room, myself included, who could correctly guess where we would be at step 15 of this process. Our brains do not work this way. And so when we see doubling curves in action, we have to be systematic and disciplined in our assessment and our analysis of them if we want to have a hope of being able to respond effectively. When I first got back from Singularity University, I started giving these talks, and I would always include some like whiz-bangy technology, like, oh my gosh, can you believe this technology is already here? And we'll talk about some of that tech, and particularly how it relates to sport. But the critical thing I want you to take away from this talk is not about what technology is available at any given point in time. The critical message I want you to take away from this talk is about how technology changes over time. That is the really fundamental thing to understand. And now that I've been doing this for a while, I've had kind of a front row seat to see what this looks like. And I want to talk you through it using just one example, which is autonomous vehicles. So I come back from SU we call it, Singularity University. I come back from SU in March of 2015. I start giving these talks. And at that time, most people I talked to sort of knew that Google had a self-driving car project on the go. In terms of public awareness of autonomous vehicles, that's pretty much where we sat. In June of that year, June 2015, Google's self-driving car program hit 1 million miles traveled total. That was an awesome accomplishment, a massive milestone, literally and figuratively. In October that year, October 2015, Tesla released a push update to owners of their Model S vehicle. This is a Tesla Model S. Push update, meaning it was delivered wirelessly overnight while you slept, didn't have to do anything to get it. You woke up in the morning and your car had autopilot functionality. By May the following year, less than a year after Google had logged 1 million miles traveled total, Tesla was collecting 1 million miles of data every 10 hours. By December that year, they had logged more than 1.3 billion miles worth of data. When we hit that inflection point, that 6th, 7th, 8th fold of the paper, things go from deception and disillusionment into chaos and amazement seemingly overnight. And so often we're left saying, it came out of nowhere. There's no way we could have known. In December that year in Christchurch, where I live, the airport took possession of a self-driving shuttle. This is it. It's from a French company called Navia in partnership with a New Zealand-based company called HMI. A couple months after they took possession of the shuttle, I caught up with the chief executive of the airport to find out how it was going. I was like, Malcolm, does it work? What's the tech? Tell me about it. I was like, are you using it? What's going on with the shuttle? And he says, Kaila, the shuttle works perfectly. The technology is awesome. No problems whatsoever with the shuttle. He says, you wouldn't believe what the actual hurdles to adoption are for this kind of technology. For example, in New Zealand, we have no law that says that you have to have a human behind the wheel of your vehicle. Not because we're particularly forward-thinking, largely because we never fathomed that you could ever not have a human behind the wheel of your vehicle. We didn't think we needed to legislate for it. There is a law that says that you have to have a rego in your front windscreen. So this is an electric vehicle, electric drivetrain, goes equally in either direction, doesn't really distinguish between front and back. It effectively has two fronts, and you're not allowed to have two regos. Again, I don't think the people who came up with this regulation were trying to be obstructive when they came up with this rule. They just never contemplated this scenario. So when you think about what has to happen for a technology to become ubiquitous, it's not enough that the technology is ready. Also, the regulatory environment has to be ready. The market appetite has to be ready. The investment appetite has to be ready. And when those things start to come into line, that's when every alarm and flag should be going off for you that a technology is about to go from deception and disillusionment into chaos and amazement. I want to give you another example of this change over time thing, because it really is so critical, this change over time thing. So in March of 2016, an artificially intelligent Go player from a company called DeepMind, which has since been bought by Google, this artificially intelligent Go player called Alphago beat the world champion Go player Lee Sedol at the game of Go. Now, Go is one of the most complex games that we have in existence. The number of possible moves in Go is greater than the number of atoms in the universe. This was a tremendous achievement. It happened fully a decade before the researchers expected it to. That's Lee Sedol up there in the corner realizing he's out of a job. A year later, DeepMind came out with a new artificially intelligent Go player called Alphago 0. So the original Alphago beat Lee Sedol 4-1. Alphago 0 beat Alphago 100-0, which is amazing by itself. But even more amazing is how they trained it. So typically, with an AI, with an artificial intelligence, you want to teach it to do something, you have to train it. So if you want to teach an AI to recognize pictures of cats, you feed it millions and millions of pictures of cats and millions of pictures of not cats, and it starts to parse all that data, and it goes, okay, these are characteristics of cats, and these are characteristics of not cats, and cats have, two pointy ears, but maybe one of them's been chewed off, so they also have eyes that are shaped like this, and nose like this, and maybe you're holding up a cat mask, and so it also has a body like this, and it's, so it starts to be able to recognize what a picture of a cat looks like, and then when it sees a new picture, it can go, oh yeah, cat or not cat. And with the original AlphaGo, that's exactly how they trained it. They fed it 40 million historic games of Go. And the AI chomped up all that data and went through it all and parsed it and was able to work out in any given situation what's the next best move. But with AlphaGo 0, they didn't feed it a single game. They gave it the rules, and they gave it the desired outcome. And it played itself. Starting with random play, literally any move will do. It played itself 4.9 million times, and within 3 days was the best Go player in the world. When we hit that inflection point, that 6th, 7th, 8th fold of the paper, things happen so much faster than we're expecting, and I don't want anyone to be left saying, it came out of nowhere, there's no way we could have known. Right, so insight number 1, not just about the transistors, it's about the price performance of computing. Insight number 2, it's not just about computing, it's about any technology once it becomes information enabled. And insight number 3 is that these technologies are now starting to converge. So now we have to consider what happens when an exponential progression in something like artificial intelligence converges with an exponential progression in robotics. We get super intelligent robots. What happens when an exponential progression in biotechnology or bioengineering converges with an exponential progression in 3D printing at the molecular or atomic level, when we can literally print matter atom by atom? And of course, what happens is that everything accelerates even faster. What does all of this add up to? Huge opportunity. Opportunity like nothing we have seen before in history, opportunity to solve for things like healthcare, like education, like energy, to make these things free and abundant for everyone. But that opportunity comes along with a not insignificant amount of terror. I lose a lot of sleep at night because of the possible terrible things that could happen. And if I'm losing sleep, you should be losing sleep. So I'm just going to talk you through a few of them. The first one is technological unemployment. In 2013, a now famous paper from Frey and Osborne suggested that 47 to 81% of jobs as we currently understand them would be under threat from technology within 20 years. In 2015, the Chartered Accountants of Australia and New Zealand said that number was 46% of New Zealand jobs within 20 years. You might have seen this headline from maybe about 2 years ago. Apple's Foxconn factory in China, they fired 60,000 people, replaced them with robots. This is a terrible story. These are real people with real lives, real families. To be fair, 60,000 people in China is pretty much a rounding error. That's so not funny. These are real people. You guys are so cruel. In December that year, Foxconn released a 3-part strategy to automate all of their factories. Foxconn employs 1.2 million people. And if you think they can't do this, they absolutely can. This factory in Dongguan in China, they fired 90% of their staff, replaced them with robots. Output went up 2.5 times, defects down 80%. They went from 650 people to 60 people. And the scary thing for me is I look at this headline and I think, if I'm the factory owner or the chief executive, of course I'm going to buy the robots. Right? You'd be crazy not to. And if you're not buying the robots, your competitor is going to buy the robots and he's going to put you out of business. But that decision that makes total sense in isolation, in aggregate, has potentially terrible consequences for society. All right, to be fair again, though, for those of us in the Western world, this plot line, this narrative, right, this story is one we've heard before. We've actually been hearing this story for close to 200 years, right? Factory workers replaced by automation. That is an old news kind of headline. We're a little bit less used to stories like this one. Artificially intelligent lawyer hired by its first law firm. Or this one. Artificially intelligent chatbot successfully contests 160,000 parking tickets in New York and London. I love this story. This is a free service. It's created by a 19-year-old kid. It's called Do Not Pay. Or this one. Artificially intelligent teaching assistant helped students online for an entire semester, and nobody noticed. And the reason these stories are starting to become possible is because the cognitive capabilities of the computers are now getting so good that they are starting to encroach upon domains that have historically been exclusively reserved for humans. All right, that's the first thing that keeps me up at night. Increased technological unemployment. I will say, technological unemployment is one of those things we can have a few drinks over and talk about until 4 in the morning, and for every paper that says we're going to lose all the jobs, there's another paper saying technology is going to create lots more jobs, and there's lots of debate on this topic. It is a very complex and nuanced topic, and as of right now today, we are not yet seeing the promised technological unemployment. What we are seeing as of right now today is increased inequality, again, largely driven by automation. The Brookings Institute just recently put out a paper that is demonstrating that we're seeing an ever greater share of wealth being concentrated towards the holders of capital and away from labor. We've actually been seeing this since the mid-'70s when we really started to ramp up automation. This was the first time in human history that GDP growth became decoupled from wage growth. And again, this is quite concerning to me because if we can have GDP growth while wages remain stagnant, then what that means is that politicians can stand on stage and say everything is awesome, GDP is high, unemployment is low. And that may well be true, but for a huge chunk of the population, they're not seeing it, they're not feeling it, it's not reflected in their pay pack, it's not reflected in their lives. And so what happens when the overt, explicit narrative is one thing and your daily reality is something else is you get this kind of cognitive dissonance, and we get people like Trump elected. But not just Trump. We get Bernie Sanders. We get Brexit. We get, to a degree, Jacinda. Like, it's this pushback of the status quo is not working for me. That inequality, by the way, we're seeing all over the world. This is the share of income going to the top 10% of the population, and as you can see, just skyrocketing in every region around the world. Right, that's the second thing that keeps me up at night. The third thing that keeps me up at night is increased cyber risk. When everything is connected, everything is vulnerable. This is just a small story. There are billions of these stories. This is a small story from recently. Hackers held the entire city of Atlanta hostage. They hacked in, they got all of their data, and they said, you have to pay us approximately $51,000 to get your data back, which I thought was kind of a funny amount of money, right? Like approximately 51,000. It's because it was in Bitcoin, so the translation. But I also was like 51,000. Like surely if you're going to hold a whole city hostage, you'd ask for at least like $1 million. I mean, really. But they wanted to put forward an amount of money that it would be easy for the city to pay. We don't know whether the city paid the money or not. We do know that they have paid since this incident at least $1.6 million to secure their data, to recover their data, and to prevent future attacks from happening. And this is happening across every vector, every single connected device, and we are connecting every device. We are connecting our light bulbs, we're connecting our fridges, we're connecting our IV machines. We are connecting every single thing that we touch. In Nevada, there was a casino that got hacked into through a connected fish tank in the lobby. We are connecting everything. And when everything is connected, everything is vulnerable. But the fourth thing is the one that I'm actually the most concerned about of all of these things. It's about the undermining of trust in our civic discourse. And I'm not just talking about what happened with Cambridge Analytica or Facebook filter bubbles, which those things are things that we should be paying attention to. I'm talking about something potentially much more insidious. If you've seen this video before, you probably don't want to admit it. This is the face of Wonder Woman, Gal Gadot, superimposed onto the body of a porn star. It was uploaded to a site called Step Siblings Caught, purporting to show her having sex with her stepbrother. It was created using a technology called deep fakes, where you can take someone's face and just put it onto someone else's body. When they first started this technology, it was extremely technical. You had to be very skilled in order to create a video like this. But of course, within about 10 minutes, they've created a user-friendly version that now anyone can go online. You can go online, you can create a video of your spouse or kids starring in the next Avengers movie, or you can create a video like this and do damage to someone. Couple that with technology that we now have that allows you to create convincing video or convincing audio in someone else's voice. Sorry, couple that with technology we now have that allows you to use your face as a remote control for video of someone else's face. So Donald Trump's face in this video is being controlled by the movements of that man's face over on the right, and combine that with technology that allows you to create convincing audio in someone else's voice, and we get a situation where we literally cannot trust what we see and hear anymore. I just want to make sure we've got the audio set up for this next video. Let's see how we go.
We're entering an era in which our enemies can make it look like anyone is saying anything at any point in time, even if they would never say those things. So, for instance, they could have me say things like, I don't know, Killmonger was right, or Ben Carson is in the something place, or how about this? Simply, President Trump is a total and complete dipshit. Now, see, I would never say these things, at least not in a public address, but someone else would. Someone like Jordan Peele. This is a dangerous time. Moving forward, we need to be more vigilant with what we trust from the internet. It's a time when we need to rely on trusted news sources. It may sound basic, but how do we move forward? Basic information is going to be the difference between whether we survive or whether we become some kind of fucked up dystopia. Thank you. Stay woke, bitches.
I love this video because it makes the point so effectively. And the thing to be thinking about here is that there are kind of two vectors to this threat. One is where you go, okay, somebody takes this kind of technology and uses it maliciously. So they create a video of Donald Trump saying, I've just given the order to launch missiles towards North Korea. And it doesn't even have to be perfect. Like that video of Obama wasn't perfect, right? But it doesn't have to be perfect. It just needs to be good enough to drive some kind of knee-jerk reaction. That's the sort of, obvious bad potential path we could go down. But there's something even more insidious here, which is, and you'll have to forgive me, I know this is super US-centric. Please forgive me, I'm totally obsessed with the train wreck that is US politics right now. But you may or may not remember that during the 2016 US presidential election, there was an infamous tape that came out called the Billy Bush tape, right? Where Donald Trump and Billy Bush were on a bus and he was bragging about sexually assaulting women, and a tape came out. And when it came out, he apologized for it. And Melania got on TV saying, oh, it's just boy talk, locker room talk, no big deal. And they kind of, they dismissed it. I remember it vividly because he never apologized for anything. And so, he apologized. I was like, whoa, that's amazing. A couple months ago, when this technology came out, though, he started giving interviews in which he said, actually, they're telling me that might not even be my voice on that tape. So now we get to a situation where anyone has plausible deniability of anything, even if you have video proof. We get to a situation where we can't even have a conversation about where we want to go because we have no agreement on what the basic facts are. And that's something we need to be super, super mindful of. So that's the terror. Sorry to bring you down. But F. Scott Fitzgerald said, the mark of a first-rate mind is the ability to hold two opposing thoughts simultaneously and still retain the ability to function. By many metrics, 2017 was the best year ever in human history. In 2017, the smallest share of our population ever was hungry, impoverished. Tickets is now being used to help refugees claim asylum. Like I said, we are entering a world where everything is possible and we can create a world of abundance and opportunity, but that's what we have to choose. I want to tell you a quick story because one of the things that happened to me when I went to SU was, I said I had this total kind of mind shift, and it wasn't because of any particular technology. Like I'd heard about most of the technologies we talked about, I'd heard about already. I'd already heard about AI, I'd heard about robotics, I'd heard about self-driving cars. Like the fact that these things existed, that was not new to me. The thing that SU did for me was it helped me take all of those kind of disparate data points and pull them together into a new coherent narrative that made me go, oh my gosh, I see this story in a way that I completely had not seen it before. And I want to give you an example of this using 3D printing. So we've talked a lot about 3D printing at SU, and I had definitely heard about 3D printing before. I did not know until I went there that 3D printing has been around for over 35 years. We're close to 40 years now. That was news to me. And especially news to me because up until that point, everyone I've ever spoken to about 3D printing is like, oh my gosh, it's going to revolutionize everything. And what have we actually gotten? Shitty models of Yoda's head. Like, this is not revolutionary, right? There is no incumbent Yoda's head model industry that's freaking out right now because the MakerBots are coming. But so I leave SU with my new coherent narrative, my new paradigm. And a week after going to SU, I went to TED. And at TED, this guy, Joseph D. Simone, got up on stage and he was like, 3D printing is terrible. This is terrible. And the reason it's so terrible is that it's not actually 3D printing at all. It's 2D printing over and over again, right? You print a layer and another layer and another layer and another layer. And so as a result, there are all sorts of problems with it. You can't really do bridges, you can't do spans, you can't do objects within objects. The mechanical tolerances are terrible, structural integrity is terrible. It's super slow, and it's super expensive. So D. Simone's like, I don't want a 3D printer that's a 2D printer over and over again. I want a 3D printer that works more like the T-1000 from Terminator 2. I want my object to just emerge from the soup, fully formed. I want it to just be the thing. And so he built it. This is it. That's what he was there to launch. It's called CLIP, Continuous Liquid Interface Production. That plate at the top pulls the object fully formed from this tray of substrate soup. At the bottom, solves every issue with current 3D printing. You can do bridges, you can do spans, you can do objects within objects. The mechanical tolerances are perfect, the structural integrity is perfect. It's 25 to 100 times faster than current 3D printing technology. So I watched him give this talk, fresh from SU, with my new coherent narrative, and I had 3 reactions. My first one was what it would have been anyway, which was like, whoa, that's really cool. Nice work, dude. But my second reaction was, of course, It's 25 to 100 times faster. And not, 7% faster. Of course, as E. Simone says, the next iteration is going to be 1,000 times faster. Because that's what an exponential curve looks like. And my third reaction was, now I get it. Now I get how 3D printing totally disrupts global manufacturing and freight. Because why would you ever pay to manufacture 20,000 of something in China and pay to ship it and pay to store it and have waste and have loss and have theft and have it go out of date when you literally can push the button and get the thing? We cannot use the past as a means of predicting the future. Last November at the Lawrence Livermore Lab, they came up with a 3D printing technique using holography that creates complete 3D objects in seconds. In seconds. Thousands of times faster than what Simone was doing with his clip technology. We cannot use the past as a means of predicting the future. But what does all this have to do with sport? Super fun. I would suggest everything. Like literally, there is not a single aspect of our lives that I can look at where I cannot find a way that exponential tech is touching it. And let's just start with athletes. So right off the bat with athletes, we're seeing incredible advances in biotechnology and bioengineering. I'm just going to show you a material that they're now coming out with that adapts on the fly to heat and sweat. Take a look. Should have left the audio on for this video. That's my favorite. I love the tea bag is like, that's a huge problem that we've all dealt with, right? Like, when is the tea ready? If only I had some kind of an indicator. Right. We're also seeing, obviously, the downside of how athletes can be affected by these technologies. Gene sequencing and gene editing is absolutely a technology that's progressing exponentially. I have a wonderful price-performance chart about the cost to sequence the human genome, which the very first genome that we sequenced cost $2.7 billion, and it now costs well under $1,000 to sequence a genome. And so we also are seeing the rise of technologies like CRISPR. Just a couple weeks ago, they came out with a new way of using CRISPR, which is a gene editing technology that allows you to go in and change specific genes. They came out with a new way of using CRISPR that is 10,000 times more effective. When you you're going to start to see these headlines and you see these numbers that it's like 10,000 times faster or 1,000 times cheaper, whatever. Every time you see a headline like that, I want you to think of me. That is the price-performance curve in action. So now we're seeing this gene editing technology become so much cheaper, and we're starting to see gene doping as a thing. And this morning, while I was waiting, there was a trivia question on the screen that said, "Is gene doping covered under the WADA or WADA codes or whatever?" And it is, but good luck trying to find it. We're also seeing huge changes for coaches. Virtual reality, obviously a tremendous thing for both athletes and coaches. This is the Stanford Virtual Reality Lab for football. This guy basically can stand in his room and practice 1,000 field goals a day without ever going near a football. And he's literally in the environment. So they've filmed him in the environment with his team all around, with the coach there, giving signals to him. And when they talk to these guys, they're like, my accuracy on field is so much higher because my muscle memory is completely ingrained now. Because I've had this immersive experience. It's not just like standing on a stage and pretending to kick. I've had this immersive experience. As far as my brain was concerned, I was on the field. And I could practice that over and over and over again. And my teammates never got tired, and my coach never got tired. We were able to just replicate that model over and over again. And they see huge increases in accuracy. And of course, when they're working in this kind of environment, they can also capture video of it to show people exactly where they're going wrong. We also have now sensors that are filling up the clothing that we're using, and we can have clothes that have embedded sensors within them that your coaches can start to see exactly which muscles you're activating as you're performing your sport, and they can correct, oh, your left-right balance is a little bit off. You're using your hamstrings a bit too much. You're using your quads a bit too much, whatever it may be. So real-time, massive data sets about everything that your athletes are doing. We're also seeing transformation for fans, and some of this stuff is still at its early stages. So virtual reality, what we're seeing in terms of people enjoying sports via virtual reality, it's not really there yet. What happens is if you have, say, they're using it for American football games, for example, you put on the headset and they're like, oh, it's like you're there. But it's not really. It's like you're there, except you're looking at it kind of through a box, so your field of vision is kind of narrow. You don't have the same sort of social experience that you have when you're physically there. But here's the thing I want you to be thinking about, again, when you see stuff like this, is think about that change over time. So every time someone says to you, oh, virtual reality, it's not the same as being there. It's not the same as watching on TV with your friends or whatever. I want you to be thinking about change over time. And what I want you to do is just add the word yet onto all of those sentences, right? It's not really there yet. Right now what we've done with VR is we've taken our flat screen watching experience and put it inside a VR headset. It's like the early days of the internet. When in the early days of the internet, we would take our company brochure and we just put it on the internet, and that was how we didn't have an understanding of how to engage with this new medium. And now obviously the internet has transformed to so much more than that, and we're going to be seeing the same thing with virtual reality in terms of fan performance. And we're also seeing tremendous technology come out of New Zealand. This is my friend Ian Taylor and his wonderful company Animation Research out of Dunedin. They're supplying tech. The story he always tells about this is that he got a phone call from the America's Cup people and they said, hey, we're running this boat race. Can you build us some technology so we can tell who's winning? And so he built this technology, and now, of course, they do work with cricket, they do work with F1, they do work with golf. Tremendous technology, all real-time, graphically generated stuff, something we should be very, very proud of. And finally, in terms of sports, we're seeing whole new sports arise as a result of exponential technology. We've got in Australia, the first demo race this year is going to be for flying car racing. So we'll have to get prepared for that. And my friend Brinkley Warren, a couple of months ago, participated in a pretty extraordinary competition. Have a look.
With fists and gloves. In the world's oldest sport, fighting. Our world has been forged by the hammer of technological progress.
We choose to go to the moon.
We have always dreamed about what the future would hold. And we have used technology to make those dreams come to life. For decades, we've imagined giant fighting machines built in our image. That technology is finally here. The age of giant fighting robots has arrived. Two teams, a world apart, are about to do battle. It's time for the giant robot duel.
So they did the battle, and it's kind of funny because if you actually watch the battle, it's not like Transformers. It's super slow, and like one robot just kind of pushes the other robot over. But again, we'll be getting there, and we'll be getting this transformative stuff. But really, I want to say kind of a core thing, which is, first of all, if there were one technology that I would like to see that I think would improve the mental well-being of parents right across New Zealand, a few years ago I became stepmom to 3 wonderful boys. The one technology that I would like to see, and I will put this out as a challenge to whoever wants to build it, is artificial intelligence that makes it so that you don't have the 5-year-old with rippers in New Brighton at 9 o'clock and the 10-year-old in Hagley and then the 12-year-old in Hornby. That would be awesome, and parents everywhere will thank you for it. But I also want to say, like, I watch these kids running up and down the pitch, and my 8-year-old stepson is he's absolutely a brilliant, brilliant rugby player. He's teeny, he's the full head shorter than everyone else on the team, but he's super, super scrappy. And it's really abundantly clear to me that technology is not, it's not an answer. It's not a replacement. It's not a substitution. It is possibly, in certain circumstances, an enhancement. It's a tool that we have the option to use. But I see these kids running around, and I know that their activity, their physical activity, that's what's giving them their brain development. That's what's allowing them to come in at night and be calm when we're sitting and having dinner together. That's what's helping them succeed at school. And so I guess the thing I want to close on is that all the stuff I talk about is great, and I think it's super important for you to be mindful about the ways that technology is transforming sport and the ways that technology is transforming every aspect of our lives. But at the end of the day, you are already changing lives every single day through the work that you do, and I just want to applaud you for that. Thank you very much.